This episode of Nuff Said is brought to you by Tweaked Audio. To get awesome headphones, go to tweakedaudio.com and use the coupon code Southgate to get 30% off, free shipping, and a lifetime warranty. Or you can get there through the link on our website, southgatemediagroup.com.
In a world of capes and lunatics, gods and monsters, there is one team who stands between you and oblivion. They are the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Nuff said. Hey, listeners, I am your host, Charlie, the Professor Esser, and with me, as always, is my skinny rich friend.
It's Mozz.
That's right, Mozz. Thank you for joining me once again, Mozz, and thank you for joining me, dear listeners. Tonight's episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Season 7, Episode 5, A Trout in the Milk. Not to be confused with Season 1, Episode 13 of The Streets of San Francisco, also called A Trout in the Milk. Yes, that episode, of course, as you will recall, stars Michael Douglas himself, the Ant-Man, and also was shot or released in 1973, the year this episode takes out. So I didn't even realize that until like 5 seconds ago when I when I looked up this episode on IMDb. But it is now I want to go back and rewatch and try to find as many Streets of San Francisco references as I can. Obviously, we've got the cool car with great fuel efficiency, but we'll get to that in a minute. Let's talk about this episode. The team, Daniel Sousa in tow, reunites with more than one familiar face at the S.H.I.E.L.D. hangout and discovers exactly how to dismantle the Chronicom's latest plan. The Zephyr unexpectedly leaps forward again. Our director this week is Stanley M. Brooks, as Stan Brooks. I wonder if he's in relation to Mel Brooks. I mean, I know Max Brooks is his son, but, he might have had more than one kid. The writers this week are, of course, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Got to give them the based on Marvel Comics by credit. Joss Whedon... okay. Joss Whedon, Jed Whedon, and Marissa Takarian.
Tancharian, right?
Tancharian? Yeah. That lady, Jed's wife, or the woman Jed is her husband. Not that that's how she got her job. That's not what I'm implying, but yes. Get her created by, and for whatever reason, they stuck the written by credit this week. Aiden Bagdachi, in between the created bys. I don't know why that was. Maybe just a formatting error, but anyway. Our story editor on this, our regular old story editor, is a nice enough guy, Mark Leitner. But, he's a story editor, but one day he dreams of being an executive story editor, like your friend and mine, George Kitson. Okay, so what happens in this episode is, of course, they have jumped unexpectedly again. Poor Enoch,
Yeah.
who is, Chronicoms say they don't have emotions, but they apparently do have passive aggression. And it's an interesting thing about that, because it's sort of one of those things where you wonder, does he feel that, or am I just feeling it because I feel awful for what we did? And he's just saying it in a monotone, but I'm going to read into it what I'm going to read into it. But anyway, we don't get to that quite yet, because obviously they have jumped forward. They turn on the radio and hear music that they assume is the 70s, which, is one of those weird things. It's like, man, what if you accidentally turned it into an oldies station? Well, clearly we're in 1963. It's like, no, that's just on the oldies station, man. And you kind of realize that, man, Chronicons could really screw up the Zephyr right now, because they could just jump ahead to 2020 and nope, we're done. We had our guys in there. They manipulated everything with the Maliks, and so we totally undid everything and did what we wanted to do. So, you're done. Which I suppose
how is the Zephyr able to chase them? Is it somehow on some sort of countdown clock that as soon as the Chronicons jump, it's designed to jump 5 minutes after or something? Or
well, no, that's sort of the idea here is as they jump, and this is just my guess.
But the window is closing, and that's what the sense of urgency is. That's why they need to jump.
It's sort of like it's sort of like a barometer. And that's how I would imagine it. It's like a barometer. So when they jump, they're jumping in space-time. That's going to cause a temporal stream pressure differential that the system is suddenly going to feel and trigger the following down the rabbit hole. That is the idea that we're creating here. I don't know how logical that is, but we don't really know what's going on with the time stream right now, because essentially what happens in this episode is they all go back in time. Coulson's trying to, woo May, who is basically, Coulson honestly is being a real puppy dog. To the point where, you kind of feel for May in this. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be with you either, Coulson. I know you remember that your Coulson once had a relationship with this person, but that wasn't you. And she is also recovering from a major trauma, and it ain't about you right now.
Yeah.
It's like, although, again, along those same lines, it's that idea that because she doesn't have emotions, there's probably some comfort in spending time with Phil. Since Phil doesn't really have emotions, he's just an interface. Or he has emotions, but they don't register in the same way that the emotions of other beings have.
And she must look at him as simply a photo album of all the good times she had with the real Phil, and just looking at this proxy of him, it probably brings her down more than anything else.
Well, but that's sort of the thing, is that really everything is a photo album, but not hers anymore. So the idea is she doesn't have any emotional attachment to anything anymore. And it's sort of like, it's sort of one of those things where
She does seem to have an emotional attachment to her previous self, because she seems to get annoyed at not being able to access her previous self pretty easily. Or
is that just her, again, it's like the Chronicons. Is Enoch being passive aggressive, or is he simply saying it in a flat tone? And we're reading that into it. I think maybe that's meant to be a comparison between the two. And I remember. Have you ever read The Wizard of Oz?
No.
The book. Okay. Yeah. So if you've seen the movie, you'll actually notice the same thing in the movie, which is that while the Tin Man says he doesn't have a heart, he still feels emotions deeply. Even though the lion says he doesn't have courage, he actually stands up and fights for what needs to be done. Does so less in the movie. In the actual books, you actually see him actually show massive courage constantly in the books.
Oh, interesting.
Likewise with the Scarecrow, you see he's always very intelligent, but because he doesn't have the physical object of a brain, he assumes he must be dumb. And
he doesn't know to take power in himself. He doesn't know how to self-empower.
And that is essentially...
without having some sort of outside validation for it.
Exactly, which is why, for what it's worth, what the wizard does works, because he just says, "You're already smart," Lots of people are smart. They have just as much brain as you have, but they have a degree. So here you go, magna cum laude. And likewise with everything else, that it's you have this all along, and of course, ironically, Dorothy had the power to go home all along. If someone would have told her that, she was like, "Great, I'll go home now." But anyway, that's a whole other thing. But it is this idea that, in the interface, you have an emotional response, even if that we see the emotional response in the interface of the AI, but does the AI really have the emotional response?
Or is it a measured response after learning the behavior of humans and how they can be best motivated?
Well, that certainly is a quality. And at that point, the passive-aggressiveness becomes absolutely intentional, as all true passive aggression should be.
But it doesn't carry the same sort of intent or bad intent that passive-aggressive behavior would. For him, it's simply just a piece of his lexicon,
Well, yeah, but it's also this idea that I would rather not be left behind 210 bar.
Yeah, but I wonder if it's that, or if it's simply him trying to communicate his message most effectively to his supposed friends, and he knows that humans react to passive-aggressive behavior possibly with introspection, and that's what he's wants to cause happen in them.
Yeah, and that is a definite possibility. I mean, as we go through this episode, and I have to say, this is an episode that was absolutely written for me. Because when Agent May meets little Ricky, Rick Stoner, General Rick Stoner, head of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Putty.
Yes, Putty. Patrick Warburton.
High five, up top.
Yes. Oh, we love this guy. I mean, or as I like to call him, the Tick. Or,
indeed,
as I also like to call him, Brock Sampson. And many other people would like to call him Crunk. So he has a lot of great, iconic roles to his name. And to have him in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., to have him brought back once more, as the physical character Rick Stoner, is just great. Yeah. And what I love about it is he totally, when May flirts with him, goes by the book HR, which I love. I love, and again, to this idea of being a stoic, non-flustered person. And for what we see later, it makes me wonder if he was sussing out even May in that moment. They definitely have an interaction and interchange based on the idea of proper HR protocols, which, hey, give it to Hydra-laden S.H.I.E.L.D. They actually do have I don't know if that's supposed to be good or bad for HR, but they do have a proper etiquette handbook that says, listen, here's how you deal with your colleagues. You're going to have colleagues. And hey, for what it's worth, Peggy Carter is a head of S.H.I.E.L.D. and may have said we should have a thing that says don't smack the female spies on the butt. That is a no-no. Don't do that. I shouldn't have to say it, but let me say it out loud. Don't smack the female agents on the butt. And don't smack the male agents on the butt either, because not all of them like it either, Just keep your hands to yourself is basically one of the things that, don't smack anyone's butt unless you're in a committed relationship. That's my opinion, or at least a casual relationship. You want to... It'll say, if you can't see the butt, don't smack it unless you're in a committed relationship. That's my rule of thumb.
Or if you're a coach, I don't know.
Well, but that's where it gets things. Well, I smack everyone on the butt. Why do you assume everyone likes to be hit on the butt?
I don't know. I guess it's just an old school thing. Coach smacks you on the butt. Hey, attaboy, you know, and you're like, hey, you know, I did good. I don't know. There's ways of interpreting that as well. Not everything has to be malicious and dark.
No, but here's the thing: is you never know if
are we so divorced from human touch that everything has to be interpreted in a bad way?
Well, and that's sort of the question. So here's the thing: someone smacks me in the butt, I don't necessarily care. But if someone smacks me in the butt and then goes home and has a fantasy about it, suddenly it got weird.
I know, but why put that connotation on it?
If I never know that, it has no effect on me, obviously.
No, but we should expect good in the world as much as we expect darkness, too, you know? There are wholesome representations of everything. We shouldn't be afraid to touch each other, you know? It's gotten a little crazy.
You know, here's the thing. Here's the problem with idealization.
But it's the same problem with you know, living in fear of the worst thing and not allowing good things to happen for the fear of bad things happening also.
Well, I guess
you can err on both sides equally, I think.
You can err, but then it comes into this question of, do people need to smack each other on the butt? And like I said, first off, I'm a touchy guy. I'm a huggy guy. Nowadays I ask, and I didn't when I was younger because I was a young, dumb, big kid who liked to lift people up because that made me feel good. Usually made them. People love to be lifted.
Yeah.
But then I found out, not everyone loves to be lifted. And now I started saying, hey, can I give you a big hug? Can I lift you up? And they would say, yeah, I'd love that. It's like, great. And I do my big bear hug, and I spin her around, and people love it. But only because now I ask, because I don't just assume everyone wants to be lifted up, everyone wants to be spun around. I don't assume it anymore. And it's actually made it much more pleasurable for everybody. Because now I don't ever have to worry that, maybe some of those people didn't really want to be lifted up and spun around like a rag doll. And now we both know, yes, this is going to be awesome. I'm going to use my superhuman strength to lift you up, spin you around. Because, you know, and we all get to be happy. And that's the thing. It's like, you know, if you're going to smack someone on the butt, and again, smacking someone on the butt, it's like the lowest level, I think, within a friendly camaraderie situation. Which problem? If you don't know someone, you should not be.
Right. I'm saying, like, you know, like a coach or like, you know.
Yeah. If a coach smacks you on the butt, it is probably the least problematic.
Yeah. Well,
though, again, it has to be the situation where everyone has to get the smack.
Right.
You know that. Well, but that's the thing. It's like not everyone always gets the smack.
Right. But if you don't do a good job, you don't get a smack.
But, you know, let's be honest. If the female keeps on getting the smack, even if she doesn't do a good job, suddenly that smack has a whole other level of it. You know, and then it becomes this crazy algebraic math. Is this a smack?
Well, no, but we're talking about sports, and obviously there'll be, you know, women.
Female play sports now.
No, I understand that, but not with the men.
Sometimes.
Well, if they're running some kind of let's not go down this road.
Well, no, but this is what I'm saying. Well, this is my point, Mozz. You know, you can hold on to the past. The past is far behind. You know.
Yeah, but the past is not all bad, and to paint everything as bad
the past isn't all
just
bad.
As dangerous a road.
What it comes down to, Mozz, is you can't. And this is the thing. You know, someone recently posted you can't hold the actions of the past to the morality of the day, or he said it was ridiculous to hold the actions of the past to the morality of today. And I said it is ridiculous to have the morality of today ignore the actions of the past. And that's the thing. It's like, you know, it's ridiculous to say we're not going to acknowledge the wrongness just because, that was back then.
I understand, but I'm just saying everything should be approached with a bit of temperance.
Well, yeah, and here's the thing. I'll say that everything is approached with a bit of temperance.
Not recently.
Well, no, because here's what I'll say, Mozz. Everything is approached with a bit of temperance personally. but everything is personal. So that's the thing. If I smack your butt, I hope we've been saying butt the whole time, or rear or behind. I don't know what we've been saying.
I think we've been good.
Yeah, I wanna. I'm gonna have to give Phil some warnings to listen to this episode very carefully. Get that beat button ready because this is a family show. But if you are smacking that butt on a regular basis, it is not a problem if the person doesn't have a problem with it. But the second a person has a problem with it, they have every right to say I have a problem with it. Right. And then when you expand this into other things, you do have this thing that, hey, if someone says, actually that is problematic, you don't get to say it's not problematic because I like it. You don't get to say it's not problematic because I don't think it's a problem.
Right, but you can't also say that you should treat it as problematic because it's my personal views make it problematic for me, so it should be problematic for everybody.
Well, but it comes into this idea that, and this is the good old boys scenario that I always say, that the song of the Duke Boys is they're just good old boys, never meaning no harm. And the whole point is, if you never mean no harm, then you have to be honest about it and say, well, I never meant no harm. And so when someone says, actually, you're harming me, then you should say, "Oh, I'm sorry." That's
not what I'm arguing at all. Obviously, that makes sense. Obviously, but you can't sort of say that everyone should feel the same way about this as I do because I was offended by this. I assume everybody ought to be, and if they are not, then there's something wrong with them.
No, but if a significant enough people are bothered by it, and you
don't do it to them, but the same thing that you espouse,
but the thing is,
and let me do me, and don't bother me if I'm doing it, if I'm not hurting
no. Well, to some extent, but if you're doing this in a public event and you don't want to do harm, that's the thing. It's like if I'm the artist. So here's what I'll say: if you want to be the artist who says, "No, I don't care. I'm just going to keep on telling my jokes the way I want to tell them," then fine, tell your jokes the way you want to tell them. You may get people that are upset. And it may hurt your career because enough people are turned off by the comedy to hurt that style of comedy because when other people raise the issue, other people think about it more deeply and they go, well, you know what, maybe I don't like that. Because, I got the gag, but, now that you say it and the fact that person is being so belligerent about it, well, that's kind of makes me go, well, dude, I thought you were being satirical. I thought you were being, it's like Andrew Dice Clay is funny when he's making fun of Andrew Dice Clay.
Right.
If Andrew Dice Clay is like, no, do the thing and then do the thing and, wham, bam, have a nice day. If that's sort
of like a trapping of, creating a character that becomes famous when you don't,
Well, yeah, but
you have to he has to be the character all the time.
Well, but does he? And he actually can turn the character off. It's like Gilbert Gottfried. You see, Gilbert Gottfried does not sound like Gilbert Gottfried at all. Right. You actually see like early Saturday Night Live where he actually did do other characters. And he's like, "Oh, hi, hello, how are you today? I would like to purchase some pastrami, samurai delicatessen." I don't think he was ever interacted with the samurai delicatessen, but it is that idea that Gilbert Gottfried wasn't always Gilbert Gottfried, but then that was what sold that's what put bread on the table. So it's like, okay, I'll be Gilbert Gottfried. Right. I'll be this character for everything because that's what people want. Now, he can do other characters, and if you ask him to and pay him to do it, he will happily be a completely different character. Though, obviously, because Gilbert Gottfried is a character, like W.C. Fields didn't talk like that. That was a lilt. That was an intentional thing he put in his way of speaking because to him it was funny. In the same way that the way Gilbert Gottfried talks is funny. If you make that thing now be offensive, if this thing winds up offending people, now again, if you really feel, look, I don't mean offense and I don't want to offend you, and if it really is bothering you, please don't watch my shows. And, you know who I am, I know who you are, and if you don't like this comedy, I'm sorry. I hope I can do some comedy that you will like later, because I do try to reach a mass audience because I'm a comedian. That's a whole different thing than like saying, no, I don't care what you don't like. This is my muse, and I'm going to do what I want to do. And this is the good old boys. Like, if you don't mean no harm, then when someone says you're doing harm and you don't want to do harm to them, you say, well, I don't want to do harm to you, so I won't do that anymore. And that's the idea. It's like, I don't want to do harm to people. That's what HR is, to get it.
For sure, and I get that, but I think people do tend to get really, really into this fervor. Oh, I'm the hero. I'm protecting blah blah blah, and everything should shut down. And just because I don't enjoy it, nobody should be able to enjoy it. Everybody should stop this. How dare you?
But do a lot of people do that, Maz? I mean,
yes, they do.
Well, no, Maz. I'm going to say you will always have a fringe on both sides who will take that extremist point of view. But the fact of the matter is that extremist point of view is at the fringes, and no one cares about them. But what the vast majority of people do and want, that gets listened to. And the fact of the matter is, so, to use an example in the news, and by the way, we have to get back to the show because Tristan has said you guys are talking a lot about stuff that's not related to the show.
Thank you, Tristan.
Tristan is trying to get us back on. That's right. I tried in the last conversation line to tie it back to HR, which is the theme of this episode.
Tristan should be producing our show.
Tristan is the producer, so yeah. My opinion and Mozz has a very different opinion, but that's good. It's good to have difference of opinions, and everyone should be writing in and saying, I agree with Mozz. Mozz is right. Charlie is stupid. And unless you agree with the counter argument or you just don't care, which is sort of where I'm at, because I think most people don't care about the controversial stuff. Because I think when you get to the controversial stuff, it was like, it's not like I'm tuning in to The Simpsons for Apu. I like Apu. Apu is funny. Apu's a thing. But if someone else voiced Apu and Hank Azaria only got to voice, the sea captain
and there's
500 gay characters.
No, but there's a prime example of it. There were no brown people complaining about Apu. It was all people, trying to stand in front of and be a shield and protectors for brown people to say that this shouldn't be. So it was that's the sort of thing I'm talking about.
Arguably, that's not true, Mozz. Arguably, that it only became an issue when a brown person of Indian descent made a whole thing called The Problem with Apu, in which he actually very actively said, Apu does serve this very important thing, and I do understand his purpose, but his time has passed. And to wrap it up, I'll let you get one last word after I said that. I won't respond.
I'm good.
But let me say this. So the idea of, and I don't want to say minstrelly here because it's not the right word, but I'll say drag in this case. There was, and not even drag, but burlesque. That burlesque allowed certain lifestyles and certain people to come into the mainstream. And so that people started having positive identifications with these things. Now, at a certain point, continuation of that burlesque, continuation of that minstrelly is long past. And it no longer serves the purpose of expanding the palette of what people will accept in their lives. And at that point, it needs to go away. But it'll always, I love.
What I don't appreciate is that things like that force people to identify as a victim because of Apu and whatnot. I refuse to let you make me a victim because of some weird sense of how an ideal world should work, in your opinion. That's the oppression of these sorts of viewpoints that I object to.
Fair enough, Mozz. And I'll let you have the last word on that.
But just from my perspective, that's what bothered me.
And it's a solid perspective, Mozz. Honestly, you have much more claim to the experience of people of color than I could ever hope to have. So I don't question your validity on it. And I think it's a fair cop. Lilith might come on and she might completely get mad at you. But she may also completely agree with you because, and here's the thing, as has been made the point of recently, nobody in the Black Lives Matter movement was complaining about whether or not the Golden Girls maybe did blackface in one episode. That was not on the top of the list, you know. Although, to be fair, Confederate statues were high on the list, and I think that's where it all gets a little muddy when you get into that whole thing. It's like, well, okay, that was the Confederate statues. Those are bad. We can agree. And no,
yeah, but then you're going after statues of Lincoln. You're going after statues of George Washington. I mean, what are we doing? How far do we take this back before everyone has to realize that as culpable as you think they are, we all are too. If we're living on stolen Native American land, that we are almost as culpable as all these people. So how far are you going to take this?
Well, fair enough.
Before you realize that you have culpability too, and we should all take responsibility and move on in a responsible manner. But let's talk logically.
And that is why we don't teach the controversy of the honeymooners at Port Authority, where the statue of Ralph Crampton stands to this day.
Now, if they come after that statue, I'm going to be really, really mad.
And they won't, because you know why? Because, and this is the truth of it, Jackie Gleason never tied people up and made them watch his show. And he could have, because he's a big guy and he was good with knots. I stole that line from what was his name? Roseanne Barr's ex-husband.
Jeff Arnold?
Yeah.
Tom Arnold.
Tom Arnold. Yes, Tom Arnold in a Simpsons parody of himself, where he gets put on the rocket that gets sent into the sun. It's like, I don't know why they wanted to send me to the sun. We were all going to die anyway. I don't know why they're sending me to the sun. Yeah, I made bad shows, but it's not like I tied up people and made them watch it. And I could have, because I'm a big guy and I'm real good with knots. That's like my favorite line of anything ever done on The Simpsons. And it is this idea that, you know, that at a certain point, yes, you know, Jackie Gleason never tied people up and made them watch his show. But you can't say the same for people that actually held people in bondage. Because, you know, when you talk about a Confederate general, well, they actually did tie people up and made them do things, you know? So it's like, oh, so maybe...
And some would argue that's the whole reason they were fighting, so they could continue to tie people up and make them do things.
And I'll say this about Columbus. Everything they say bad about Columbus, it's actually from his diary.
He said it himself.
Exactly. It's like, he's like, oh man, these people would make great slaves. It's like, and it's actually funny, if you ever watch The Cage, they actually like kind of quote from Columbus when they're talking about the green animal women of Orion. So it's like, well, you know, as it turns out, Roddenberry read a book or two. But anyway, getting back to this episode. So yeah, yada yada yada. HR. It's a golden age for HR. Let me say that much. Getting back to this show. So Gideon Malik was supposed to have died in 1970. He's not dead, which makes Deke very upset because he's like, I didn't kill him because you told me not to kill him, and now he's been alive for an extra 3 years because the timeline is already screwed up.
Yeah, and makes a really interesting point. And what's her name? Quake?
Yes.
Lends credence to our point. I mean, like, hey, we have a chance to do something good, but in the interest of maintaining a timeline, which if you've watched any show about time travel is impossible, you're making it worse. The situation is actively worse than it was when we got there, and we had a chance to have at least the possibility of making it a whole lot better. So I understand his conundrum.
But, you know, along those same lines, there's a secondary conundrum with Sousa, where he says, you know, look, did I ever die? Or do you always just go back in time and pull me out of it? And it's like, could I have stopped this, you know?
We're creating always as we speak, buddy, so it's up to you, I guess.
And this is the essentially this pull the threads question, which is what we're dealing with. Essentially, this entire season is an answer to the endgame question: could Steve Rogers go back in time and marry Peggy Carter and not alter the timeline? Because, and it goes into that basic question. It's like, are we to say that Steve Rogers, Captain America, for 80 years, sat on his duff and did nothing?
Helped no one.
Yeah, it seems unlikely, because just being in the past, he's going to help someone.
Right, he's too good. He's too worthy of that hammer to not.
He is gonna help an old lady across the street, and little did we know that old lady was Aunt May's killer. You know, I mean, something's gonna happen that it's like, you know, just because he's just being in the past, but this goes to that question: either you always went back in time, and that, of course, is the question of Captain America and this, which we've mentioned before, is like, did Captain America get a explanation of how he could travel in time and not disrupt the timeline? You know, and is it you can never do anything, or is it you can only do small things? You know, you can save people's lives when you want to, but when you get to a certain point, it's going to be a tipping point. You know, what's your question, Tristan? Well, that's the question we're debating. You know, he's asking the basic question: how could, if going back in time you can change the past and it doesn't affect the future, how could Steve Rogers go back in time and affect the past and not affect the past but be in the future? Well, that's the question. And there is this idea that was put forth in The Incredible Hercules, where essentially Hercules suggests this idea that you can have multiple pasts. That pasts can come together at a certain point. And if you think about it, there is this argument that is the idea of sliding time, which is something that was established in the Ultimates, which is that certain powerful events get pulled forward in time. Because this event is too powerful to unhinge from its moment. So for example, Captain America in the 40s can't be moved. That's a fixed point in time. But his awakening, that can move and will move as is needed throughout time. Because eventually you need Captain America to awaken. It is sort of like the idea they did in the New 52, which is that Superman's arrival on Earth is the point of the start of any DC universe. That once Superman arrives, that kicks everything else off. But that time is not fixed, and every time a universe is created, it will have another, like, you know, you'll have them fall in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s, so that a 20-year-old Clark Kent in 2020 can walk into the Daily Planet for his first job. DailyPlanet.com at that point, but still, you know, and that's the idea that certain points get pulled forward in time. So when Cap goes back in time and lives a full life, however he does it, he was always meant to do it as the idea. And that is what Sousa calls out in this episode, where he says, did you guys just always go back in time? Which is a possibility. Because it is a possibility that someone from the future always went back to that point, always saved that moment. Now, over on the Patreon podcast, for Capes and Lunatics, we are currently doing Star Trek episodes, and we just did a great episode. I'm sure somewhere in the show notes there's something about our Patreon page for Capes and Lunatics. We did a great description of relativity, where essentially, no matter how many times 7 of 9 gets blown up, they can go back to that point and pull her out again. So they keep on pulling her out, and she does something, and then she dies. But then they can go back to that same point and pull her out again, because the past is the past, and it doesn't matter how many people are pulling her out at that one moment. They all get to pull her out. So it's weird. Don't think about it too much. But
it's kind of like Kenny from South Park.
Not dissimilarly so, I think. But so they go to the party, and we're only like 5 minutes into this episode still. Enoch hasn't even shown up yet. But they go to the party. They're announcing the reveal that Insight is going to be done about 40 years too early. We find out that May actually not only can pick up on emotions, but can get drunk off of other drunk people. So fun was had by all. They realize they have to stop Insight. They get called out by Freddie Malek, who who is alive and the head of S.H.I.E.L.D., but now recognizes all the other people. His Chronicoms show up. Chloe Bennett, Quake, or Daisy, or Sky.
Daisy. Right.
Yes. She has like
right.
Four
That's because she has so many names. That's why I can never remember. Okay.
Yeah, you're not the only one, but yes, she captures.
I keep wanting to say Wendy. I don't know why.
Yeah, why not? But she takes Nathan Malik, who also was supposed to die in 1970, because as it turned out in the past, it's okay. Basically, after Wilfred Malik dies, Gideon Malik sacrifices Nathan Malik to the stone that sends him to the planet far in space where the ancient inhuman hive lives. So anyway, it's a whole thing. But anyway, that never happened, which also means I guess Hive just went without a sacrifice, or that Gideon intentionally sacrificed his brother once his father was gone just to make his own play, because he was actually more evil, which actually suggests that even though they're launching Project Insight right now, the Chronicoms are intentionally damaging Hydra because they've kept a person who should not have been the head of Hydra and the head of S.H.I.E.L.D. in the position of being in charge of it. So, an interesting turn of events as they play out. But essentially, they hold Nathaniel hostage. Freddie Malik lets them leave. The Chronicoms are like, why did you do that? You could have killed them, and it would have only cost you your son. He's like, it's my son! He's like, oh, okay, you people are weird.
What are you, a robot?
Yeah, exactly, you know. But then, of course, as luck would have it, at just that moment, now how we knew at just that moment, we don't know. Maybe they'll explain later. Maybe they never will, and that's fine. I'm not waiting for an explanation, but we know that just at that moment, Enoch pulls up in his awesome car and has them all jump in and drives off. Come with me if you want to continue to exist.
I love that.
We get his little passive-aggressive, yes, as I've been for the last 40 years.
40 years.
They go back to the Zephyr, and then immediately we see that Simmons is having a weird thing. She's got little red dots in her back of her neck, which to me says she's an LMD.
Right, okay, yes, thank you.
Or at least cybernetically enhanced. And what my actual belief is she is probably... So they did this with Dum Dum Dugan, where he was alive in like a test tube in suspended animation, but they had the LMD out being Dum Dum Dugan in the field. And that's why he got to live forever, too. And then one day he realized, wait, I'm an LMD, but he's not really an LMD because he's not running off of an internal program. He's actually still running off of his own brain waves. So, it's a whole thing. Anyway, long story short, where was I? So, Simmons is having a problem, and then she says, she's having trouble remembering things, and the entire ship jumps right when they get back because the Chronicoms have changed plans, which suggests that time is not fixed. The Chronicoms and them all have free will. Anything can change at any moment, and they have already, again, made this change, which means that in a classic interpretation, they are now like 3 universes over. Not getting back to the future. They're only... Really, arguably, they're just trying to get to a future that is close enough to the one they left, which arguably they may be able to do, or they are going to figure out how to move laterally back to their own universe and not be time travel duplicates. So that's the question. But when they do jump, they go 3 years into the future to 1976, and in this one, Sousa makes a statement that I think is very telling when she says, this is the last time I'm jumping with you. And I kind of wonder if Yo-Yo is feeling the same way. That maybe they'd be better off to make a life in 76 than to try and keep on jumping with this. Because there are too many things to fight right now. There's too many injustices that they can't ignore. And to say we can't ignore these injustices, we can't just say they already died. We can't just say this already happened. Because first off, none of this has already happened. We are definitely in a new timeline. Now we are morally responsible to fight here. And that it's in 1976, again, feeds into my theory that Sousa will become the spirit of 76.
I'm with that. Every time they travel and try to fix ideas that are bigger than them, they are not successful. Maybe your role is to recognize the position that you're in and try to do the best you can there. And that's what they're feeling. And by that token, not only will Sousa stay, but maybe Daisy and who's the scientist that's God, why can't I remember his name? Simmons' grandson.
Was it Dex? Yeah, Dex.
Right, him. So he's him, Daisy, and Sousa might stay. Deke, right. Deke, Daisy, and Sousa might stay. Because they're all feeling the same thing, and I'm, tend to agree with them.
They could be the all-winners squad. And although I have to say, I'm so mad they haven't given Sousa a new leg yet.
Yeah.
Now, granted, it probably takes time to 3D print out one. So maybe they just didn't. Oh, I didn't know we were gonna. But they should have thought. We might have to build new legs. They had time to build Yo-Yo her arms, but they should have thought. Yeah, we're probably gonna have to make some more legs and have other body parts we're gonna have to replace if we're gonna have this adventure. So I would think that they would be able to manufacture a nice leg for Sousa, and I thought that that bionic leg would be an important aspect of it, but. Maybe not. We'll see. We'll see if we ever get to that, because at the end of it, they go to blow up Project Insight. They're going to flood the base, and that's going to scuttle the launch. And hopefully that stops it. Although, obviously, one scuttled launch isn't going to prevent them from moving forward. Arguably, even what they did, which is eventually when they decide not to scuttle the launch because they realize that Mac's parents have been captured and are in the base, they don't have time to evacuate them. Although, arguably, that raises the question, well, how are May and Phil supposed to get out then? But, a lot of logic, a lot of fridge logic in that. But, we're going to move on from there. They do have to blow up the Project Insight as it's flying. So they have to fly up and shoot it and give away their position. Which means now the Chronicoms know where they are. So, which tells me I don't think we're jumping outside of 76. I think this is the end of the line. Or at least a partial end of the line until they can figure out what they can do next. And, they did say that they were going to bump up against the MCU here. We're still waiting to see how that'll be. And I gotta wonder what happens next on that. But... one thing I got to call out here, and this is one thing again, going back to Rick Stoner, my favorite character in this episode, definitely Patrick Warburton gets our hardest working man in the show business thing,
yes.
Is that, Phil comes up to him and just starts ranting about look, they're time-traveling aliens from the future. I said, oh, TTAFs, okay. Wait, what? Okay. He says, TTAFFs, okay. He says, robotic or organic? He says, a mixture of both, actually. He's like, and then, May touches him. It's like, he didn't buy it. I said, what? I was kidding to him. But it is just that perfect thing where he's totally going to listen to your crazy rant, accept it, and then he's going to sort of shuffle you off into a room so we can talk about it. So that was brilliant. And then also, of course, Deke killing Freddie Malik. And saying, did you see that coming? Classic call out to the best line in any Avengers film. What, you didn't see that coming?
Yeah. That, and I think it was that emotion that he's been struggling with come to a head, and he finds a resolution there by saying, I don't care how this will affect my personal belief is that I'm doing some good by taking this guy out. Come what may, it can't be worse than us not killing him and then the world getting worse anyway. So here's to you, buddy. Good night.
Mm-hmm. Although arguably, but of course, what happens next is Yo-Yo and Sousa get captured by Nathaniel, who then reaches out to Whitehall to not get Whitehall, because we probably couldn't get the actor back, but to get his notes on how to surgically transfer superpowers. Because apparently you have a super spleen. And when you put the super spleen in someone else, now they have superpowers. Sort of like the, I don't know, whatever Jadzia Dax was. Okay. Any final thoughts on tonight's episode? Because I'm sure we're running a little bit long at this point.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I thought was absolutely adorable is that Deke calls her Nana. I thought that was great. And that little conversation he has with them, he's like, where's Bobo? He's like, Bobo? He's like, come on, you don't know this yet? But of course you don't. It hasn't happened yet, but you're Nana and he's Bobo.
Well, he doesn't, she should know that, but as you said, she's losing names. So I think, and that's what I think with the idea of Simmons in a vat somewhere, sort of quantum mechanically communicating with her LMD, is that, yeah, she is out there, but without Enoch to sort of direct things, her LMD loses focus with her real self, and that's why she starts to forget things. So that's my theory. Mark my words. We'll see what happens. All right, Mozz. So I think that was a great episode. I think we can all agree to that.
Indeed. Absolutely.
And, if you're listening
I wish
to this,
they would have kept that weird film grain from the title sequence throughout the whole show. That would have been really, really cool.
It would have been. It would have definitely been. I think that I love the 1970s intro. I can't wait to see it again next week.
Yeah.
Makes me wonder if we jump to the 80s, if we're gonna get like an 80s sitcom intro, or maybe we'll get like a Law and Order.
Fun.
A Law and Order. It's like maybe they'll be like, in a world with capes and lunatics, gods and monsters, there are two separate but equal branches. The Shield, who tries to protect us, and Hydra, who tries to tear us down. These are their stories. We'll see what they do next week. Or technically the week after, or technically 1 week from today, because today is Wednesday, and really it's almost 10 o'clock right now, so we have to wrap this up. So in the meantime, if you're listening to this episode and it does not sound as good as you would have liked it to, it's probably because you're not using Tweaked Audio headsets. Yes, Tweaked Audio headsets, available at tweakedaudio.com. Simply the finest headsets money can buy that'll get you through our podcasts. Likewise, if you are feeling emotionally and mentally stunted and need a stimulus, something that'll get you feeling like a true agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., why don't you go over to hunttokiller.com and see if you can help private investigator Michelle Gray solve a cold case, because she needs your freaking help. It's like an escape room delivered to your door every month. Filled with ciphers and clues and things that'll help you solve the crime. So definitely go there. And then, if none of that interests you, go down into our show notes, click on the Amazon link, go to Amazon, buy whatever the heck you want, because that's what it's there for, and that's what Amazon had. And while you're there, check out Pod Life, the book, which is a great book about the life of a podcaster, why podcasters do it, and how they do it, and, what inspires them, and how podcasting may have saved some people's lives. So check that out if you like the idea of podcasting, because it's a thing. Anyway, in the meantime, Mozz, if anyone would like to talk to you about that or something else, how can they find you?
Oh, they can email me at mozzmanzor@gmail.com or find me on Facebook under Mozz Manzor. That's MOZZMANZOOR.
And you can always write to me in that old-fashioned email way that we are, Mozz and Pods once did at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, at gmail.com. Of course, follow me on the Twitters as I live tweet Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in 6 minutes on Wednesday nights at 10. At Charlie Esser, that's CharlieEsser. Look for the 2 E's in the middle.
For quality. Bing!
Thank you, Mozz. All right, dear listeners, you have once again hung out with me and Mozz, talking about those brave heroes who keep this world safe, the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Until next time, there is nothing else to say but enough said.
Enough said.